From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Here's what's ahead. K-State's Glynn Tonsor provides this week's cattle market analysis. He'll talk about the downturn in boxed beef prices as the main factor in last week's price declines, and Glynn looks at an assortment of beef demand numbers as market indicators, rounding out this calendar year. Then from the Kansas Forest Service at K-State, Mark Neely talks about the heightened potential for wildfires in Kansas this winter. And he'll list several things that you agricultural producers and other rural residents can do to protect your property from wildfire. Later, Jeff Wickman with this week's 4-H segment. He'll talk with K-State's Beth Hinshaw and Susan Schlichting about the Kansas Clover Classroom. All that here on Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others, and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Thanks for being aboard once again for another Agriculture Today on the K-State Radio Network. As we always do on a Monday, we open with the cattle market overview, and along with us once again is livestock economist Glynn Tonsor of K-State Research and Extension to go over what's been a sinking market to round out 2020. Glynn, it's really struggling to get to the finish line, and last week was more evidence of that.
It is, and there's consistent with 2020, there's a mixed bag of signals that are at play, so we'll try to break that down. Let's start with just what numbers were in the markets this past week, and I'm actually going to open it up with wholesale beef to mix it up because I think that's where the story is maybe front and center. So we closed Friday, choice cutout was $214. That was down from $235 the past Friday, so yes, that's a $21 decline. Select was also down $21, came in below 200, so $196. Those are strong declines. I'm going to break it down real quick before we go into the cattle prices, because I think this is an important backstop, is the overall cutout is actually up 3% since the end of October, but rib is the only primal that's up, and it's up 21%. I think there's some holiday effects in that we're going to come back to in a moment, but perhaps more concerning is all the other primals are down. So they're either slightly down like ground is, or they're down a full like 5% like brisket is. As we moved away from grilling weather and so forth, we're starting to see those seasonal pressures coupled with an ongoing food service challenge. What has that done to the cattle markets? So cash markets this past week, AMS said light volume through Friday, down about $2. So fed cattle were 108, down about 2 from the prior week. That compares to flat actually on the board. So the December live cattle contract was about a little over 108. Not a lot of action, comparatively speaking, compared to the cutout there. I think we may have some more this coming week. When we look at feeder cattle, AMS called the Kansas markets, cash markets that is, down $5, a few cases of flat, but most of them are down almost $4 for the week. 2 lots, just for context. A lot over 400 head, weighing 527, came in at 170. A lot that's 100 pounds heavier came in weighing 150. So those prices are still better than some of us would have anticipated, but they are under some pressure. The January feeder cattle contract was down just below 140, so 139 and change, down 50 cents for the week. To summarize all that, the cutout pulled back hard. We didn't see as much of a pullback on cattle prices, whether it's on the board or cash, but I think we may be setting some pressure up for this coming week on that front. And I think it spills over from food service is kind of mothballed. We're hinging on retail demand. We're going to keep doing that for the weeks ahead. The only bright spot in that cutout report I kind of gave you was the rib primal is still up, and it's carrying the day, so to speak. But it's the minority of pounds that we get off each animal, so that's important to monitor.
But the holiday factor here, overall, normally we see some struggles with beef at this time of the year. Is this above and beyond the norm?
Yeah, my gut tells me it's the typical seasonal and some more. I hope we don't have fatigue from at-home cooking that we've had for several months, but that could be building as we speak. There's definitely protest against shutdowns and so forth at home, and that can spill over into less optimism and paying up for lots of things. I hope that's not occurring. It may not be because the rib values are up. So, that is evidence people are paying up for, I'll call it the celebration holiday meal. What's maybe more concerning to me is the pullback on the other primals. So chuck being back 3%, over that same period since November kicked in. Brisket down 5%. That's probably a little more seasonal. Just grills are shut down. That's probably a lot of that. But we use a lot of hamburger all year long, right? So ground and chuck pulling back is concerning because those two primals, because they give us where we get our ground beef, have been a key part of this COVID experience, and I think it's important to watch them the next few weeks.
We'll track it very much so. The update on cattle processing, which has been of interest ongoing since the pandemic ensued. We're fairly well caught up and remain so, are we not, in terms of pace?
Yeah, we're within 1,000 or 2,000 head out of 665,000 head a week of being on par with the prior week and the prior year. So by that metric, yes, we're on. We're caught up, so to speak. I think that's great. We're not out of the woods. I don't want to say that every time we're on here, but it is important. Take note what I just said is the cutout pulled back, but cattle prices didn't pull back quite as hard this past week. That in no small part is because we're still running these facilities hard. Had we pulled back the facility operation due to labor and COVID challenges and so forth, we'd have a lot more downward pressure on those cattle prices, and that hasn't happened at least as of mid-December. Obviously, I hope we get through the winter with that occurring, and that's why I bring it up, is it's a good news story that we've managed to get those volumes up and sustain them. I hope we can make it to warm weather in the spring and keep that up.
Do want to reference as well your updated look via the meat demand monitor you maintain at the demand side. A lot of this that you've alluded to already, but have you added numbers from that to share?
Yeah, so there's retail versus food service trends that we've already talked about here. Those numbers are on Ag Manager. For our quick listeners, that's beef and pork checkoff funded work. I encourage you to make use of it. Yeah, I'll drive home this point with some numbers on this holiday meal effect because I think it's going to show up again over Christmas. Is in November I started asking, and we're doing it again here in December. We're still collecting data for December, is what are your plans for the holidays? And we ask, compared to normal, do you think you're going to spend more, same, or less time with your family and friends? And 38% said they're going to spend less time with their family and friends. So over a third said we're going to pull back and do less. That's consistent with not getting together and or getting together in smaller groups. We also follow that up with, same question, but how do your meat expenditures, your plans for spending on celebration meals, change or compare to normal? Again, same, more, or less. And now only a fourth, so 26%, said they're going to spend less on meat here during the holidays in November, January, and December, includes Christmas. Why am I highlighting that? We've had more people say they're going to pull back on time than we have meat expenditures. I think that's consistent with, there's a lot of commentary around Thanksgiving. People didn't want the 14 to 16 pound turkeys. They were shrinking. I think it's consistent with rib demand is up per that cutout measure. I think there's some people that are upgrading away from big birds towards, boneless pork loin if that's their thing, or in this case, maybe a ribeye item, or, I plan to cook prime rib on Christmas Eve personally. I think there's a lot more interest in that. That is good. I hope that continues. I think it might. I think we're going to probably have continued reduced mobility and interest in not everybody getting together with 50 family members over the holidays. That could be good for beef if it leads to people saying, hey, I need to feed 30 people. I'm going to feed 6. Therefore, I can, quote unquote, afford to upgrade the cost per pound to feed everybody. I think that calculus is going on. So that is a ray of sunshine in the story, and I think it will continue through the Christmas season.
And still in the arena of demand, these numbers you'll share are from the USDA. It's a consumer demand monitoring that they conduct. And this is not only domestic, but for the export market as well. The numbers for October have just been put in recently. What are those telling us about competing meats as well as that export trade?
Right. And real quick for our listeners, there's a lot of different demand info I'm throwing at people. Some of this is data because we had to wait till it comes out, and that's what we're going to talk about now. So the USDA-based data is after the fact. That's what we're talking about October now. But looking back at October, we found all fresh domestic beef demand was up 6% compared to October of 2019 and up almost 2% actually compared to September. That was good. Pork was up a full 12% compared to September. It was even stronger. That spills over and helps beef as well, of course. Chicken was down about 3% compared to September. So on the domestic front, we entered the phases of these shutdowns and tightening of activity in a good space on domestic demand is how I would drive that point home. What about exports? U.S. beef export demand in October was up 4% compared to September. Pork was up 14% and chicken was up 21%. That is consistent with we've managed to get production of all those major meats back up, like we said a minute ago, and we are producing a lot of those pounds by historic standards. And Asian economies in particular have bounced back and avoided the same COVID, second and third waves, at least not the same extent that Europe and North America have had. And with that, their demand for protein, I think, has been a little bit stronger, and they're pulling those pounds over. That is good. I'll remind people, I'd mentioned this week cattle prices didn't come down as hard as the wholesale beef prices and so forth. There's a lot of reasons for that, but the only way we're going to keep from pushing down those cattle prices further is for all these demand signals to stabilize. I'm more optimistic on the export front maybe in the next few months than I am domestic, because I am concerned about domestic food service.
So collectively, Glynn, as we're not going to visit it again until 2021 gets here, what's your general perception of the cattle market and where we're at, given everything that's occurred in this strange year 2020?
I am amazed at the logistical progress that has occurred. So go back to April, we were literally struggling to harvest cattle the way we normally do. I don't want to say that's behind us, but I am amazed that, we have more than 6 months of success of adapting and managing that. I went to my local Hy-Vee to pick up groceries this weekend, and quite honestly, the disruptions in the supply there are less than they were even a month ago. And that's not just a Hy-Vee, it's just to make the point. So my first impression is logistically the whole industry, and that starts from the cow-calf seed stock decision all the way to the guys stocking my Hy-Vee shelf. I'm amazed at the improvement we've had there. What does that mean for prices? Cattle prices are up because we're managing to actually get that done. Demand signals are mixed. Retail demand has been pretty good on balance. I am concerned about signals on ground at the moment, and I'm certainly concerned about food service because we can't sit outside when it's 12 degrees in most of the country for the next couple months. But I'm optimistic on exports. So put all a bow around that. We're in a lot better shape than I thought we would be if you were asking me these questions on April 10th or something. Are we out of the woods? No. Is there still some challenges ahead? Yes. But we're in a lot better spot than yours truly would have been saying 6-8 months ago. That'd be my summary.
All right. And we want to let folks know before you get away that you'll be part of an online meeting being held by K-State Research and Extension tomorrow evening, where you'll share the market outlook and much more.
Yeah, so I'm going to kick off our session. Clay Simons is going to follow me up. Clay, for those that don't know him, is with KFMA, going to give some tax advice. Several of our partners, I'll just shout out Brett Middleton and Sandra Wick in particular, have helped pull this together. We're going to do a live run on this, as you said, 7 o'clock, details on our ag manager. If you can't make it live, that's fine. I understand we all have different schedules, but there should be a recording available, and I hope you find that useful.
You can find out more about being part of that online gathering at agmanager.info. Glynn, as always, many thanks, and in advance, happy holidays.
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
Livestock economist Glynn Tonsor, K-State Research and Extension, with this week's Cattle Market Insight on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today, and our purpose on this segment, wildfire awareness in Kansas. We are in a part of the year where wildfires can start rather quickly, and the conditions have lined up in that direction once again. We brought by from the Kansas Forest Service here at Kansas State University, State Fire Management Officer Mark Neely. Mark, thanks for joining us. As you look at the conditions that be across our countryside in Kansas right now, all the elements are there for wildfire outbreaks.
Thanks for having us here today and just getting this message out. And you're right. This time of year, we do have the conditions that allow for pretty easy ignition of fires, the activities that can cause man-made starts, and then we have the fuels that are very receptible to large fire growth also. The one component that is not as consistent as what we see, particularly in the springtime, is the wind. Now, we've had some very large wind days this past month, and they did result in some larger fire activities through the state. We do have kind of a secondary fire season. Our primary is that time frame in the spring where we start seeing an increase in fire activity, weather conditions, droughty, dry weather in that March and April time frame, and then it peters out in May. But we do start seeing a trend of larger fire activity happening, and it's usually right after that killing frost. Time period depends, but sometimes it's 3 to 10 days after killing frost. Those fuels dry out. They go into their dormant season. They don't have the snow packed down, so they're standing upright, which allows more oxygen into those fuels to help carry a fire. And then once we get a big wind event, it can very easily ignite and start larger fires, as we've seen in even northeast Kansas up by Rossville, south central, and northwest Kansas have all had some larger fires that we've had to deal with in the month of November.
The fuel load that's out there, you might think back to a year ago. We were coming off of a very productive, rainy year, and there was plentiful fuel out there to burn. Is it similar this year? Is it a little lighter? What would you say about that?
No, the fuel load is still there. We were able to carry a bunch of soil moisture through the year. So we're dry right now and droughty conditions, a large portion of the state. But that soil moisture did allow for abundance of fuel. We can see some of those plant materials at what we call 1,000-hour fuels. Those are kind of the larger logs and stuff. They're drying out. They've been without the moisture for a long enough time that they can start on fire now. And so those things are all still there, all readily available, and they are catching. And all that means is a lot more heat for a longer period of time and a lot more effort to put it out.
As you look around the state, what we know to date anyway, what are the most vulnerable areas of Kansas? The potential is there everywhere, but...
It is. So there's a couple different factors that go into that. The southwest and northwest are always going to be on the danger side just because of relative humidity. They're constantly going to have a lower RH, which plays a great effect into our fires, than we'll see in eastern Kansas. Now, with that being said, southeast Kansas went through a long period of time without rain this past year. And so they're in the bullseye also. Like you said, it's all over the state. So I think we have our hands full going through. Now, historically, and I don't want to jinx it, December kind of gives us a reprieve. We start seeing a little bit more shots of moisture, not as big as wind events. Same with January. And then the cold, if we can keep a consistent cold, that helps too. But once we're back into February, I think we're going to start seeing some things kick up. I hope we get a 2-month reprieve, but we'll see about that.
Reality of it is La Nina is in place. So
yep.
Those snows in particular may or may not come.
That's right.
So we shall see. So as you talk then with rural dwellers, anybody out there who would be in proximity to a potential wildfire, what are you sharing, Mark, as far as possible mitigation steps that each and every individual can do?
Yeah. Being a landowner has its responsibility, even just if you have a house out in the country. It would be a good idea to check those gutters. All those leaves fall in. Look around your house for those things that can hold on to a spark, an ember, and then just sit there and then increase. A large majority of homes don't burn from the flame front. They burn from an ember landing in their wood pile or flammable furniture out on the deck, the leaves in the gutter. We need to clean those out. Clean out your flower beds. Just look around your house for those flammable materials that can hold an ember long enough that can start your siding or it can start some other flammable material on your property. And it's not just your house. It's your outbuildings also. Look around your propane tank. Where do you keep your firewood stored? You just got to look at those things. And every time you look at it, think about if that catches, what else is it going to cause damage to?
And there's value in some cases in knocking down those heavier fuel loads. Get out the brush cutter, for instance, and create your own fire breaks. These are things that landowners can do not only for themselves, frankly, but for neighbors.
That's right. And it's great driving around the countryside, and you can see the ones that are pretty proactive about it. Right along their fence line, you'll see a good, really mowed down scalp mow line around their whole property. And keeps their fence line clean, and it helps them. If they're planning to burn next spring or next summer, it helps them. Or if their neighbor's property starts on fire, it's a place that they can make a stand. But you can do that around your house also. Just keeping it mowed and clean cut, void of some trash and stuff, helps that also.
Mark, there's an excellent resource of information that Kansas Forest Service is associated with. It's a national effort. The FireWise information that's out there for anybody to use. You feature that, a link to that on your website. Mm-hmm. That's worth mentioning here.
It is. So we have folks all over the state now that can meet with landowners individually. We can talk with landowners on FireWise, communities with some community wildfire protection plans then additionally, on that suppression side, we can work with those local fire districts on some training. So we have a lot of resources that we can help individuals from that landowner to a community, and it could just be a subdivision that wants to do it. It doesn't have to be a governmental community. And then, of course, the governments themselves. We can work with counties and local municipalities to just kind of help them prepare for fire protection also. The more homes that you have fire-wise, the whole community benefits from that. And if we can see that more and more, then we feel a lot more comfortable when we have these large wildfires that they're not going to be wholesale destruction on communities out in the rural areas.
You can pursue, by the way, that good information under the FireWise banner at kansasforests.org, as you can likewise access the updated to-the-moment Fire Danger Index for Kansas. And for anybody doing anything outdoors as these conditions persist, that's a good routine to reference that.
It is. And we put out some products along with the National Weather Service to just kind of give some ideas of what it looks like. So if you are planning to do a prescribed burn, you can look at that Grassland Fire Danger Index. You can also get online to check out not just today's weather, but tomorrow and the day after. And that's many times when we see some of these fires is it's not the day of big weather events, it's the day before, and that smoldering prescribed fire or brush pile or leaves that somebody burnt. And so that Grassland Fire Danger Index is on our website. The one thing we do have to be careful with that is it doesn't count in all of the variables. And so we could see like a very high fire danger day in June, but the humidity is not factored into that. So we are working on a couple products that is a national product. It's the National Fire Danger Rating Index. We've been monitoring that, beta testing it this past year, and hopefully that will be the one that kind of takes in all the variables of fuel, weather, and timeliness of the year. That will put out a product that allow people to make wiser decisions on when to do some outdoor activities. And then that will be advertised again on our website also.
Looking forward to that updated version. For the here and now, what's there currently is still of high value, and you can get to that by going to kansasforests.org and click on the Fire Management tab toward the left-hand side of the page. That'll take you to all of this. But in closing, Mark, it's something that everybody has a responsibility for, and that is assuring that we minimize or eliminate, if we could, wildfire activity in Kansas.
Yep, and what people don't necessarily understand is we have 4,000 to 7,000 wildfires a year in Kansas. If you ask a normal Kansan, they'll probably just say maybe 20 or 30. Well, that's the big ones that we hear about, and that would be a large number. But our local fire districts do a tremendous job of putting out these fires small before they become damaging. And we just want to continually assist those folks. Again, I mentioned earlier we have some district fire management officers across the state. So if fire districts are wanting some fire training, we're here to help. We have adjusted by taking our training curriculum and making it more available either via Zoom or some other type of virtual media. And we also have some standalone training that we can just pass off to fire departments themselves, fire districts themselves, that they could do it on their time with their own personnel. We do have folks out there, if you are interested and want to schedule something or want some of those products, you can check our website, and it has our district folks out there also, and touch base with them, and they'll be glad to help you out.
Thank you, Mark, for coming over.
Eric.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
He's the State Fire Management Officer with the Kansas Forest Service here at Kansas State University. That's Mark Neely with us on this Agriculture Today. And we'll return with more for you in just a few moments on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're listening to Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network, now in its 97th year of broadcast service to Kansas and the Central Plains. Eric Atkinson with you. And now today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. The USDA has completed its rulemaking on an undue preference rule related to meat packers' business relationships with livestock producers. The final rule was published in Friday's Federal Register. It sets criteria for the USDA to consider when determining whether an undue or unreasonable preference or advantage has been given to a poultry or livestock producer by any meat packer, contractor, or dealer, that as described under Section 202B of the Packers and Stockyards Act. That rule will become effective 30 days from Friday. The USDA is responsible for determining whether actions constitute a violation of the Act. Now, the final rule, which includes some changes from the proposed rule published back in January, defines unfair treatment of producers as giving any preference or advantage that cannot be justified based on cost savings, meeting a competitor's prices, matching a competitor's terms, or as a reasonable business decision. Besides those four criteria, the rule allows the USDA Secretary to take other factors into consideration as appropriate on a case-by-case basis. The issue of small refinery exemptions under the renewable fuel standard continues to percolate, with the Department of Justice now weighing in on whether the Supreme Court should review the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals decision that found that 3 exemptions granted were invalid because they were not continuations of prior exemptions. The DOJ opted not to appeal the 10th Circuit ruling, but the 2 companies that were affected by the decision are pursuing an appeal. The Circuit Court decision does not meet the court's ordinary criteria for granting certiorari, according to the Justice Department. The government agrees with petitioners that the question presented has important implications for the Renewable Fuel Standard Program. This case, however, would be an unsuitable means for addressing the question, they say, because a decision favorable to petitioners would not change the judgment. The Department of Justice also argued that other pending proceedings provide an additional reason to deny the petition in the case. The court case could be one factor in why EPA has yet to decide on the 17 gap year exemptions still pending and on 41 exemptions for the 2019 and 2020 compliance years combined. If the Dakota Access Pipeline is closed down, agricultural economies in the Midwest could find it difficult and more expensive to ship grain. That's the allegation of 14 states in a brief filed with a federal court ahead of an early January deadline for briefs related to a proposed injunction. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit will be considering an injunction to halt operations because the pipeline does not have an easement. In the amicus brief filed with the court, the states of Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, South Dakota, and 9 others are siding with agricultural interests, the pipeline company, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The brief argues that any state's large amounts of grain currently shipped by rail, grain that will suffer displacement because of competition with higher revenue oil for access rail transport if the Dakota Access Pipeline is shut down, according to their argument. Also filing separate briefs were the state of North Dakota and numerous agricultural groups in North and South Dakota. Now, District Court last summer ordered that pipeline closed as a result of the permitting issues with the construction of the line dating back to 2017. On July the 14th of this year, the appeals court ruled that the line could remain open pending an appeal. Agricultural groups have told the court that a permanent shutdown of the pipeline would have devastating consequences for farmers, would drastically increase the costs of transporting commodities. A new USDA report shows that farming is overwhelmingly still a family business. Here's more from the USDA's Stephanie Ho.
What were some of the main conclusions of the 2020 edition of USDA's America's Diverse Family Farms report?
To summarize the report, we found that 98% of U.S. farms are family farms, and they account for 86% of farm production.
That was Chief Author Christine Witt of the Economic Research Service.
Although small farms make up 90% of the farm count, large-scale family farms have the largest share of the value of production at 44%. Small farms, though, still count for almost half of the value of poultry and hay production.
Meanwhile,
in 2019, about 43% of farm households had income below that of the median for all U.S. households, and 3% had wealth less than the U.S. median.
For more details, the entire report is available online at ers.usda.gov. This is Stephanie Ho for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And a new report released by the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture and Purdue University shows a strong job demand for new college graduates with degrees in agricultural programs. U.S. college graduates can expect approximately 59,000 job opportunities annually between the years 2020 and 2025, says this report. That reflects a 2.5% growth from the previous 5 years. Employer demand will exceed the supply of available graduates, says the report, with a bachelor's degree or higher in agricultural-related fields. The preparation of the report began before the coronavirus pandemic, when global socioeconomic conditions looked much differently than they do at the release of the report. They said it was extremely challenging to project the success and the perseverance of current college students, let alone the employment opportunities that await new graduates during the global pandemic, according to Marcos Fernandez of Purdue University, one of the principal investigators. He said, regardless, the project team confidently concludes that the need for graduates and employment opportunities in agricultural fields will remain strong and steady. Graduates earning degrees with emphasis in food, agriculture, renewable, natural resources, and the environment will account for 61% of the annual supply pool. Most of the employment opportunities, says the report, will be in business and management at 42%, another 31% in science and engineering. Openings anticipated in education, communication, and government will make up 14%, and 13% will be in food and biomaterials production. Quick reminder that the yearly Conference for Women in Agriculture, co-sponsored by K-State Research and Extension, has now been set. It'll occur virtually. Women Managing the Farm, February the 10th through the 12th. There'll be a look at relationships and health, agricultural and estate law, crop production, marketing, and management among the session themes. If you'd like to learn more about the program, what it'll entail, or registration, go to womenmanagingthefarm.com. That's womenmanagingthefarm.com. We'll be back with more here on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. As Kansas 4-H continues to adjust its programming in the COVID-19 era, an online classroom has been launched to help youth explore the organization's project areas. Southeast Area Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Beth Hinshaw and Susan Schlichting, the 4-H Youth Development Agent in the Cottonwood District, are both involved in the Kansas Clover Classroom project. Susan, first off, maybe just some background. How did this project get started?
Well, this is one of those things that the Northwest 4-H Advisory has been working on and talking about for a while. And then COVID-19 came along, and it nudged us into a whole different direction. And we began working with a statewide committee to develop what we're calling the Kansas Clover Classroom.
And the idea here, Beth, is that you will put out some challenges for youth to take part in?
Yes, there will be challenges that are in different project areas, and we look at these both as a great opportunity to have some type of good project-based learning, but it's also an opportunity to maybe just explore a project and see if you'd like to go more in depth with it.
So how is this all working? I know it's all online. It's on the Kansas 4-H website page, but how do they go about maybe getting involved with these activities?
There is a dedicated page on the kansas4h.org website called the Kansas Clover Classroom, and there we will be populating over the course of time a number of different project challenges. and you click on the challenge, and it takes you to the bookstore where you can download a free copy or you can request a printed copy for a fee to get started with the challenge. If there are supplemental materials that go along with the challenge itself, those are attached to that document, so it's all one package of information. They are developed in different skill levels. Some of them may be targeting very beginners in a project area. You've never done photography before, but here's some things to help you get started doing photography. There may be some things that are more advanced in different project areas. We're just really getting started now, and we hope that we can have something to challenge 4-Hers and other youth that are curious about exploring in a project across our 30-plus project areas in Kansas 4-H.
One of the things also that we want people to be aware of is that we will be populating this page with more challenges in the future.
Do you know how many people have been able to take part in some of the challenges so far, or is that something that you're trying to get information and feedback on?
At this point, we know that there have been a number of downloads of the 4 project areas that are already up in the bookstore, several hundred, in fact, in some of those projects. But one of the things that we really want to focus on, too, is the fact that there's an evaluation piece with these challenges. And so at the end of the challenge, we want 4-Hers or youth to take pictures of what they've done in their challenge and then fill out a quick little survey to help us to improve upon the challenges and to create things that are really meaningful for the kids as they do their exploration.
You mentioned that you've been in the process of putting up new activities. How did all of this come about in terms of finding out what could go on the page and who's been submitting all of this material? Because I imagine that this is not like just throwing something up that you already had. There's probably been some background work that's had to go into this.
Right. A number of years ago, they did a survey of the top 4-H projects in Kansas, and so we started out with the top 10 list, and we're trying to populate those project areas that are most popular, and then also looking towards filling out and populating all of the project areas eventually. But we've worked at the top 10 first. It is agents and volunteers from across the state who have a passion for that project area, maybe have done an extensive amount of work in that area, that are developing these different challenges.
This may be something that came about because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but this is something that's going to live on because this is something that really doesn't have a shelf life, does it? People can always get on there and do these challenges.
And that's definitely what we think, that these are always going to be an opportunity for people to come on, explore a project. One of the other things that we think about, that this is a really wonderful opportunity with lots of people home, probably for the winter holidays in a few weeks, that this would be a great page to go to and start exploring some new projects.
And not only can the youth participate, but I'm imagining, especially in terms of like the foods and nutrition activities, there's probably things that they can do either with a sibling or with mom, dad, maybe even grandma, and they probably don't even have to necessarily be in the same house to do some of these projects.
That is so right. I think there's lots of opportunities here. These projects are pretty generic and universal, and so they certainly could be something that a project leader could take on. A teacher in a classroom could jump in and use these resources, or parents, grandparents, or, as you said, it could be done through a connect with technology or with a grandparent that lives at a distance and work through the baking project together or something like that.
I'm assuming really then anybody will benefit from doing this, anybody who's in 4-H or even project leaders who are maybe looking to expand some of their interest areas.
I think these would be great for project leaders. You know, it could be something that they're going to lead the young people through, or it might be something that they encourage them to try at home with their parents first, and then maybe they'll get together for more project learning afterward.
I know part of the process is normally getting feedback on projects. Is that something that can still be done through this format?
Absolutely. I think that the activities, the sheets that we're putting together have suggestions for project activities that they might develop further and exhibit if they wanted to have some feedback through that 4-H fair exhibit experience. So we're giving them some of those kind of ideas to help spur them along in their learning once they've gone through the initial challenge.
I would also say that there is a little self-evaluation piece on each one of these as well, so that they can go through and answer those 3 or 4 questions to think about, you know, did I really catch that concept, or do I need to study this a little bit more?
And as you mentioned, this is a great time to be doing this because there's going to be some downtime or at least some away from school time, and a site that it sounds like people should probably be checking back with rather frequently just to see what has been added that's new.
Absolutely. We've got a number of projects that are in the pipeline right now, probably 6 or 7 different ones that are close to publish at this time. And so we will be continuing that effort throughout the winter months and continuing to populate. So please do check back and see what kind of cool, fun things there are out there on the Kansas Clover Classroom.
And again, Beth, where can they find all of the information?
They're going to go to kansas4h.org, and if you go under resources, you'll see 4-H Clover Classroom. What you'll see is pictures of what these sheets look like, and they're bright and colorful, and we really think people will enjoy using them.
That's Southeast Area Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Beth Hinshaw and Susan Schlichting, the 4-H Youth Development Agent in the Cottonwood District. They're both involved in the Kansas Clover Classroom project, which again can be found at kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.